is a common phrase used in many films, talks, media, and the phrase is protect our coasts and oceans. But I'd like you to pause for a moment and consider, if you had to protect your local coast and ocean, what exactly would you be protecting? I'd like to begin by asking you two questions. First, how many of you here have looked at a marine chart showing the varying depths of the sea off your local coast? Have you ever considered how deep you would be, say 5, 10, 20 kilometres offshore? And just like on land, how many uplifts and unique geological features lie off your coast? We are all really familiar with the fantastic variety of landscapes here in Taranaki. But why, I wonder, do the landscapes under the sea fall, for so many of us, into the great unknown? And it certainly was the great unknown for me, not being a fisherman, diver or boatie. I first looked at a marine chart for my local ocean back in 2014, and I was blown away. I discovered how unique the seafloor off South Taranaki is. A shallow shelf extends way out over 22 kilometres offshore, out through the Taranaki Regional Council's jurisdiction and into the EEZ, or Exclusive Economic Zone. So, why is depth so important? Well, from an ecological perspective, depth has an important role to play as it impacts on the degree of light to reach the seafloor and the ability to photosynthesize for the microscopic plants that live on the seafloor, those that float on the ocean waters, and the largest seaweeds and algae that cover our reefs. Now for my second question for you. How many of you here have chatted to a local diver or fisherman and asked them, as I naively did back in 2014, is there much out there off our coast? And I remember now their quizzical look of, really, you don't know? And they began to talk of the fish, the dolphins, the soup of plankton, the orca, the blue penguins, the reefs. Reefs? What kind of reefs? And they described reefs close to shore, reefs far offshore, each with their own characteristics, different shapes, some papa rock, some hard rock, caves, pinnacles, and varying metres in height. I watched videos the divers had taken and, to be honest, felt kind of ashamed that so much life existed off my coast that I knew so little about. How many others, I wondered, were like me? It was quite a revelation to discover that many in my community were unaware, and certainly unaware of the offshore reefs and the biodiversity to be found on them. And this is where my talk today gets really exciting. I'm one of the volunteer project leads for a community-led science investigation into a hard, rocky reef, studded with fossilised shells and covered and inhabited by a great variety of life. It lies 11 kilometres offshore of Patea, South Taranaki. The aim of our project, called Project Reef Life, is to determine how unique the South Taranaki offshore reefs are and to share our data and knowledge with our community, our iwi project partners, the wider New Zealand community, and scientific experts. We have an incredibly challenging environment in which to do our research. First, the depth. At 23 metres, we have enough air in our tanks to survey the reef for 30 to 40 minutes. And then there's a matter of accessing the sea through the Patea Bar. Even the most seasoned boatie treats it with great respect. And then there are the strong currents, meaning we have a narrow window of opportunity in which to do our research, effectively the turn of tide. Outside of this, the currents can be so strong you can't swim into them. This is far from doing surveys on shallow tropical reefs and skimpy togs. Our divers wear 5mm wetsuits. So, all these environmental challenges influence the design and development of a first-of-its-kind in-situ camera, secured at the reef, taking short video bursts day and night. One of the great strengths of our project is collaboration, and building the in-situ camera was the first such important collaboration. I got in contact with a super creative electrical engineer I knew, Leith Robertson, engineering manager at Wells Group here in New Plymouth. This photograph shows the Mark I version of our in-situ camera, with the sophisticated wiper, which keeps the front of the housing free from colonising organisms. And this photograph shows the intervalometer that Leith designed, which instructs the camera and lighting when to turn on and off. We are a pretty innovative project team. Richie Guy, volunteer project engineer and secretary of the South Taranaki Underwater Club, took over the early camera trials, using his goldfish pond for testing watertight testing, and his beer fridge for testing battery life under cold conditions. We were, however, to face an unanticipated hurdle. The reef proved too hard to drill into to secure our camera. Bruce Boyd, fellow project lead and member of the South Taranaki Underwater Club, wasn't fazed. He would build a structure that could withstand the strong currents, and he did. A 1-ton pyramid, constructed from concrete slabs he built in his garage, and then took out on his boat and secured at the reef. I wonder if you've ever thought of the sounds on a reef. At the beginning of the project, I had just finished reading about Dr. Craig Radford from Auckland University's Marine Lab and his work documenting the sounds of marine species like kina eating. I contacted him and discovered he hadn't recorded the acoustic sounds in South Taranaki. He was happy to loan us a hydrophone and review some of the sound files. Win-win situation. So the hydrophone has recorded the unique sounds of fish species, the call of a whale believed to be a humpback, and an aftershock rumble from the Kaikoura earthquake. Before I introduce you to the other science we conduct, let's briefly meet the Project Reef, home to many species of plants and animals. To date, we've recorded over 100 species in a publicly accessible database called iNaturalist. So, why is the reef such a great home? Well, first, it's a long way from shore, 11 kilometres, so less impacted from sediment events from rivers and cliff falls. Second, its height, reducing sand inundation. And third, the South Taranaki Bight benefits from nutrient-rich waters, which are brought in from an upwelling from the South Island. Some of the highest densities of zooplankton in New Zealand have been recorded in the South Taranaki Bight, and large densities of salp and krill in the Patea shoals. And talking about zooplankton, prior to this project, I hadn't appreciated how many creatures like fish, crabs, crayfish and kina begin their lives as larvae, floating on ocean currents for weeks, months, and even over a year, depending on the species. Now, if you were a larvae and wanted somewhere safe to settle and grow, somewhere with crevices and overhangs and a forest to hide in, well, our Project Reef provides just that. The reef is a blaze of beautiful colour. Though, if we didn't shine our camera lights, you probably wouldn't realise, as the sea filters the light spectrum. Red light has the longest wavelength and the least amount of energy, so is largely lost by about 4.5 metres. Orange light by 8, our Project Reef is at 23 metres deep. To show you what I mean, here's a photo of one of our sponge gardens. With little light, we haven't shone our camera lights, a dull blue. And with light, we shine our camera lights, a beautiful mass of orange sponges greets you. Then there are the jewel anemones, stretching for metres at the Project Reef, gorgeous orange, purple and pink. And these stunning creatures, the clown nudibranchs, with their intense orange spots and purple gills. Here they are with their beautiful rose-shaped egg case. It's funny to think how little I knew prior to Project Reef Life about New Zealand sponges. Yet now, as any of the project team will tell you, I'm really passionate about them. At the beginning of the project, I got in contact with a New Zealand sponge specialist from NIWA, Dr. Michelle Kelly, who has identified from photographs and samples we've given her 22 species to date, with more waiting to be identified. Such collaboration adds a great and important richness to our project. So, why do I love sponges? Well, I love the variety of shapes and colours. At the Project Reef, we have round red balls, bright yellow and orange finger forms, sprawling grey masses, Christmas pudding-looking ones. Hey, I could go on. Sponges are an animal, a pretty incredible animal. The genetic diversity represented in the sponge world far exceeds the human genome and indeed the entire mammal world. And because sponges don't move around, they produce chemicals in order to defend themselves from organisms wanting to eat and settle on them. And many of those chemicals have anti-cancer, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory and antidepressant properties. 95% of sponges found in New Zealand are endemic, meaning found only here. We've had a few sponge highlights. The latest NIWA Sponge Guide contains 2 of Bruce's awesome sponge photographs. And through my reading of that guide, I recognised an unusual sponge washed up on my beach. It's a possible new species and now safely stored away at NIWA. I've had to go through a massive upskilling in terms of my fish knowledge, from basically nil to now being able to understand and recognise many of the fish at the Project Reef, understanding something about their amazing life cycles, their feeding preferences, their ages. Again, early on in the project, I got in contact with a New Zealand fish expert from Te Papa, Andrew Stewart, which has been a fantastic collaboration. Who would have thought that some fish can change sex, like the curious blue cod and the beautiful scarlet wrasse at the Project Reef, which can change from female to male. Amazing. Many of the fish at the Project Reef are plankton feeders, like the goggly-eyed leather jackets and the nocturnal common ruffy. So, what about the science we conduct? Well, excitingly, we have 2 project partner high schools involved. One method we use is a Benthic Survey, and Benthic means seafloor. We run randomly generated transect lines with a tape over the reef, taking a photo every metre. Using open source software, 100 random points per photo are assigned, with our marine scientist Josh and high school students identifying the substrate or organism on each point in order to determine the percentage coverage of plants and animals at the reef. Another method we use is a fishing survey with the aim to find the diversity and abundance of predatory reef fish. 2 high schools are involved in gathering. They go out on charter vessel trips to the reef and analysing the data. We recently trialled another method, a baited underwater video, with our students working with our marine scientists to review all the frames of a 30-minute video in order to find the one frame with the greatest number of blue cod. So, whilst the glamour of our project is definitely the stunning photos and videos we take, there is a massive amount of work in analysing the hundreds of data files we obtain. A real highlight for us was in June 2017, when the project team and high school students presented our findings to the Education and Science Select Committee at Parliament. I believe sharing knowledge with policymakers is crucial. New Zealand's current legislation enables the economic development of our ocean, but also considers the environmental impacts. Information from Project Reef Life has been shared regionally with the Taranaki Regional Council, with the Project Reef now recognised in their draft coastal plan as an outstanding natural feature. Information from Project Reef Life has been shared nationally by various parties to the decision-making committee of the EPA, or Environmental Protection Authority, which recently granted a 35-year permit to mine up to 50 million tonnes per year of seabed material in 20 to 43 metre depths off Patia. The Project Reef was mentioned numerous times in the decision document and included in one of the monitoring conditions attached to the granting of consent. To the great delight of the project team, we have been formally recognised in 2016, winning a Taranaki Regional Council Environmental Award, and in 2017, winning a National Green Ribbon Award. In conclusion, Project Reef Life has delightfully grown in directions we never anticipated at the start. We didn't let the vastness of the ocean intimidate us. Instead, we chose a rocky offshore reef, a hotspot of biodiversity, and let it tell its story. And the more we look and explore, the more exciting the story becomes. I hope the reef continues to tell its story, and generations continue to learn and share its tales. I asked you at the beginning of my talk, if you had to protect your local coast and ocean, what exactly would you be protecting? My wish is that my talk today has inspired you all to go and find out. Thank you.